We're so glad you're here.
Thanks,
And
it's great to be here.
yeah, if you don't know Michael, he's at Clawhammer Press, and you're up in Fernie, right? You're up in Canada.
Yeah.
And he's got one of the few letterpress shops in Western Canada. It's a working studio. Michael is an artist and a printer. He works largely in fine art prints, ephemeral paper goods. They integrate hand-carved blocks, typography, and of course, a slightly offbeat sense of humor, which we actually really enjoy around here. And Michael, I've always been amazed. You've come to Hamilton. We've shown your work in New Impressions. I love your use of color, your use of carving blocks. I really, really enjoy your work. So I'm really glad you're here to tell us more about what you do today.
Well, thanks. Thanks for the great intro. It's good to be here. And Hamilton has been like a lifeline to me. For those of you who don't know where Fernie is, we're about 30 minutes north of the Canada-US border, north of Eureka, Montana. So if you're looking at the northwestern states there, Washington, the Panhandle, and then Montana, we're just east of the Panhandle and north of Whitefish, Montana. So to orient you, so we're not far from you guys, but it's amazing how that artificial line kind of creates some differences. But
especially right now, I wish we could visit.
Yeah, no, I often ship paper right to Eureka and drive down and pick it up, but not so much right now. So anyways, hopefully that we can get back to sharing that border a little better. And once this sort of pandemic thing's done, but for now we wave across the Zoom lines. Yeah, I've been down to the Ways Goose a number of times, I think 5 or 6 now. I don't have a tally in my head, but they've always been amazing, you know, and it's been, as a sort of somewhat isolated Western Canadian printer, seeing all these people that I knew their work and didn't really know what they looked like on Instagram. You know, it was amazing to show up. I think one of my first minutes in the Hamilton, the museum there, I think it was Aaron Beckloff actually, was like, "Oh, you're a Clawhammer Press," and like, "Oh," like, and so it's just this recognizing of, you know, because you have this little name tag that has your name and your press, but you have no idea what people look like, and you have no idea if people actually know you exist. But then it was like all my people were there. I just didn't know what they looked like. So it's been really amazing to be part of this greater community, and it's really an honor to be sort of co-hosting this thing. I thought I might start off with a quick studio tour, but if you want to go in depth, I did do a little longer broadcast from the United in Isolation series that was sort of done through the spring, which is a great sort of look into everybody's work and studios and what they're doing. So if you want an in-depth studio tour, you can go and watch that at the United in Isolation, and maybe if someone gets a chance to post a link in there, or I don't know, Stephanie can do that while we're doing this, but anyways, otherwise I'll put it up after. There's a great video there, but we'll do a quick studio tour, and it doesn't take very long because this is not a big studio. I've had a number of studio spaces. This is my 4th studio space, and it's by far the smallest. You know, I started in a 300 square foot space, and then I moved to a 1,200 square foot space, and then I moved to a 4,000 square foot space that I shared with a painter. And this is 140 square feet. I see Meredith put that up there. Thanks, Meredith. Anyway, so this space here, and I'll try and move slowly because it can be kind of jaggy, but this is my print shop. There's the mur de type, as I say in French, the wall of type. And there's the people door, some presses, some great light. There's my Vandercook. And there's more type. And there we're back at the beginning again. Over here is my painting studio. I'm also a painter. And so you can see a bunch of stuff laying on the ground. And that is everything. So as you can see, it's sort of like the ship's galley equivalent of a print studio. But I downsized about a year and a half ago. Yeah, everything's in reach. And it sort of changed my process in a way, because before I could print a huge run of things and just spread out everywhere. And in this space, there's just no room to do that. So instead of doing a project and then cleaning it up, I, do the make ready and then I clean up, and I do the composition and I clean up. Like, it's just sort of every phase has to be cleaned up right after. And so in order to operate, I have to be really tidy, which is not always my default setting, but I'm finding that it's really, I'm really appreciating having a clean and tidy space all the time. Anyway, so studio tour over. I want to show a little bit of the work that I do. And as Stephanie, how many square feet is the space? It's about 140. It's roughly 15 by 12, but it's kind of not square. So there's a little notch over here that, anyway, 150 square feet. And I still managed to get 6, 7, 8, 9 cabinets of type, a Vandercook press, a make-ready top, and all the other things that I need. 2 galley cabinets, and then shelving. It is 10-foot ceilings, so a lot of the storage goes up. Anyway, as Stephanie sort of implied, my work wanders quite a bit, and as a person, like, I'm just more of I just like to pursue different things. I don't like to do the same thing. I've always struggled with finding a style that is mine, but as my origin is in graphic arts, so I feel like each project I take on as a separate project, and I try and address it in a way that is more like, what does this project need, not how do I use my style to address this project. So to give you just a little bit of history, I actually worked as a blacksmith for 2 years, an architectural ironworker. So I did a lot of forging of towel bars and window frames and mirror frames and chandeliers and railings and things like that. And it was a really fascinating project. And then I moved on to digital design, but I really missed that sort of tactile quality in my work, and then that sense of history. So I started investigating letterpress as a way of doing digital design, but with my hands, because I love working with my hands. So eventually I transitioned from doing digital design into letterpress. And so my printing press has evolved with me as a design tool, really. And within that greater scope of design, I really feel like the range is so vast that we'll never exhaust the possibilities there. So anyways, my work is quite diverse. I'll show you a few pieces, and then I'll talk about the one thing that I'm working on right now that has really been fascinating, and I think we can geek out a bit on that. So my personal work wanders quite a bit, everything from little journals and notebooks that I do with wood type, just some designs and patterns with, I'm a journaler, so I love making these things, although it's tremendously labor intensive, especially when you're using alpha blocks to do the covers. I've done a very little bit of literary work. So this is a local poet, and this is printed on Saint Armand canal paper, and it's handset dust jacket. The inside is digital. For those of you who aren't familiar with Gasbro Press in Canada here, this is sort of the model that they kind of have evolved, and where the insides are offset or digital, and the covers are letterpress printed, although they do many other wonderful things. And my friend Andrew Steves there is an incredible resource for those literary things. Here's another thing, another sort of poetry book. I also did a lot of cover design, and this we actually did a broadsheet for, but it was a digital design book cover. what people most recognize about my work, I think, is these reduction prints. So I do a lot of reduction prints using split fountains, trying to create sort of a more subtle variation on the split fountain that we typically associate with day glow colors and whatnot, and trying to use that. So that's a 5-color reduction print in a series that I did using these split fountains. I've also done some things like this here, and I think this one was actually in the new impressions last year. And again, this is using split fountains to articulate. This is me just trying to think about sort of a visual iconography of living in a mountain town and community and those kinds of things. Anyways, that's the start of a project. And this is sort of a further development of it. And again, these are reduction prints. And this one actually ended up being a mural in my hometown that's 16 by 96 feet. And I kind of had to adapt it into a really long version. But it was a really interesting process to adapt my printmaking into a mural, which I painted a year ago. So anyways, if you go onto my Instagram feed, you can see pictures of that mural going up too. And then sometimes I just do experimental things. This was a thing I did a few years ago, just playing with CMYK and trying to abstract type in a way that was just visually interesting. And then, of course, if you saw the sign up here, this is the thing I printed a while ago. I like big type and I cannot lie. Anyways, I like to play with type too. So this evolved out of a conversation with my friend Myrna at Expedition Press. You know, she said she said one time, the only whiskey I have is crap whiskey, and I said the only crap whiskey is no whiskey at all, and we both simultaneously said that needs to be a poster. So I made it. Anyways, we were talking about quirky sense of humor. Here's some other things that I've sort of just played around with, and anyways. And I had a friend who actually grew up in Nashville, and he used to say this. So he lives near me now, but this sounds like a good philosophy for life. So anyway, those are some of the kind of things I do. But when it comes to commercial work, and this is really what I want to talk about, is you know, when I started Clawhammer Press, and we're officially 9 years now, so we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary next August, I guess. There wasn't really a lot of knowledge about what the market was like in Western Canada for letterpress, especially small town. There wasn't a lot of commercial operations going, and no one had really tested it. So I kind of just said yes to everything. And as a result, I kind of discovered this whole range of available kinds of works. And over time, I've sort of refined it to, you know, these are the kind of things I like to do. These are the kind of things I'm good at. And this is the kind of things that the equipment I have is good for. And I've really kind of decided to say no to a whole bunch of things that don't fit in that. And so part of that being a commercial style printer is that if you just take on everything, then you end up doing, someone once told me, he said, do the work you want to do. So if you do a bunch of things, you'll get more work in that avenue. So if you don't start saying no to things, at some point you'll end up doing work you're not happy with. And so over the years, I've had to really narrow the breadth of that work that I've taken on. And I found a really interesting niche where I'm still using my printing press as a design tool, but because I kind of grew up in the digital world, I can offer that transition from analog to digital really seamlessly for a client. And so I've ended up doing a lot of projects like, let me just grab a couple here. So these are some posters, and they come off as gig posters in a way, but really they're album cover designs. So I've used like a Lino block reduction print, wood type, metal type, and then some, I don't know if you guys have ever been to Jerry's sale at the Ways Goose, where you can buy bags of off-cut Taipai wood for $20 or something like that. Anyways, these are all the little bits of virgin wood type offcuts as tree trunks. Anyway, so this is an album cover design, but it's done as a print. So I've gotten into doing a bunch of those. Let's see if I can do this one-handed. So again, this is like a 7-color reduction print with some wood type and some metal type at the bottom. And this is a 5-color reduction print with some wood type and some more virgin wood type offcuts and whatnot. And even this, this was a double album actually. So this artist released an album a double album called Tongue and Groove. And the first one was a vocal and the second one was an instrumental. So we actually cut this in half, and this became the album cover for both of those. But it's got a lino cut split fountain background with wood and metal type layered on top of it. So it's a really fascinating project. Now the good thing about doing stuff like that is that you give clients a way to recoup their cost, whereas a digital designer would design something and it would be sort of a lost, like, well, you get the album cover art, but hand printing them, it actually creates a saleable product. So the initial cost might be more because it's more time consuming, but if you can sell a poster or a limited edition print for your project for X amount of dollars, then often I find my clients are able to actually make a profit on my services rather than it just sort of being about the amount of money they have to spend to do this. Anyway, so those projects kind of led into a few interesting ones where I started to do a series of posters for a local, so there's Island Lake Lodge is a famous cat skiing operation right here in Fernie. They're just outside of Fernie. It's a gorgeous place to visit. And so this is, again, a 4-color reduction print with some handset type. So we did a series of 4 of these that the actual design was a beer bottle. And of course we have a local brewery. And so this is a cool collaboration between a local printmaker, a local cat skiing operation, and a local brewery. And I was able to take this design all the way through to the final label design because I have the experience with the computer part as well. So this project, which, like I said, was 4 posters. Here's one of the other ones ended up on a can as well. That one doesn't show up as well. But, led to this project here, which is I think this one was in one of the new impressions a few years ago as well. Gross Mourne is an area in Newfoundland in eastern Canada where there's a national park, and there's some folks that lived in Fernie but half time on the other side of the country as well started this coffee roaster. Excuse me, and they asked me to do the branding for them. So this poster actually was a branding project. It started out as a imagery kind of project. The end that we were trying to get to actually was, this is their coffee bags, and this digital print ended up being a little bit dark maybe, but you can see how basically they were designing packaging, but they've also been selling these limited edition prints as part of their project. So we've done 2 posters for them now. One of them I think Stephanie used in the promo for this little hank. So you've seen those other ones too. Anyways, it's a branding project, so we had different considerations where we're actually creating a logo as well as a poster as well as packaging. So, but this is all analog, even though the final result is really a digital thing. So it's kind of an interesting little window that I've sort of found and created for myself, which sort of brings me to this project that I wanted to talk to you about today, because it's very new, or it's very ongoing, and because I recently just finished printing another set of labels. So I'll show you the finished. So this is a product here. I'll try and hold it still for a second. So there's a local distiller in town, and he's very off the side of his desk. Like, this is not his full-time job. So it's kind of like a moonshiny kind of a thing, although he's doing it all legally. He's not actually hiding it. Is there a question? Do I need to pause here, Stephanie?
You're so good and on top of this, Mike. Yeah, someone wanted to know if do you convert your poster designs to packaging labels? Are you recreating the artwork in Illustrator, Photoshop, or scanning the original print? Like, how do you get to that package?
Mostly I am scanning the original print, because the main reason to do this is to preserve those handmade textures. So mostly I'll scan the piece, and I have a flatbed scanner that, and I don't know if anyone has used the photo merge tool in Photoshop. It's actually really kind of amazing. So you can scan it, and I've scanned like 9. In a big poster, I've had to scan 9 different scans on my flatbed scanner, and then use photo merge, and it will stitch together pretty much seamlessly. And then you can adjust the color and use that as a, whatever file format you need. There are times, some of you have seen these Clawhammer mints. So this was another project where, and I have a poster here. So I printed this. This is again a 5 color reduction print, I think, all carved out of Lino. And what I did was I sketched the design in pencil, and then I transferred it onto a linoleum block using all of the elements that I needed for this design. And I had the size and dimensions of this tin in advance. And so you can see all of the little elements that were going on the tin are sort of in this poster. So what I did was scan this poster in the end and vectorize it. Like, in a tin this size, you won't actually get the original textures of letterpress or the type. It's very difficult to preserve it because you're shrinking it down so much. So what I wanted was clarity of line and the process of designing in an analog way. So what I did was, I kept some of the original pieces here, and this is much easier to vectorize than this. So I would vectorize this, and then suddenly you have, the character of line and the quality of line in the work. And that's much more scalable in a vector format in Illustrator than like a bitmap format in Photoshop. So we can geek out on that a bit more later if there's questions. But anyway, so that's sort of the process that I use. It sort of depends, but mostly if I can preserve that texture of the wood type or the hand carved block, I like to do that, because otherwise, why else do it?
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah,
and again, this is both. Yeah.
Question, Michael?
Yes.
Oh,
sorry, who's talking? I can't see the. Sorry.
Oh, it's Bobby from Just a Jar.
Oh, hey, Bobby, how's it going?
It's going well. Awesome seeing your studio and your work. When you're working with clients and you're like presenting them a concept that's going to be a woodcut, what's your process of like presenting a design to them? Do you mock it up in full color on the computer, or do you just send them a pencil sketch, or do they just kind of trust you? Give you some freedom.
Well, I like to try and I like to try to get them to trust me. I mean, that's the easiest. But mostly my process is pencil sketches. So I'll do a thumbnail, and I don't actually have a lot of any examples to show you right now, but I'll typically do 3 or 4 pencil sketches of really rough thumbnails, sometimes 5 or 10 minutes on each one, and send them that. And it never gets more formal than that. And I might develop that sketch into something a little bit more finished based on their feedback. But then often the next time they see it is the finished print. Because I don't know how you do color proofs on a 7 color reduction print. Like it's just not, it's not feasible for me to be even texting them colors and like, is this color okay? Because they can't imagine what it's going to look like. That's my job. So what I want them to do is trust me to take their vision to the end, to the best that it can be. And almost always it works out. This company here that did these things, I'll just grab another one here. Hold on a sec. So let's see, I'll try and hold this up. This was the first tin that I did for these guys, and the owner bought one of my posters at a music festival and asked me to design this. So I did that. I sent them a pencil sketch, and then I sent them the finished print, basically. And then we did the digital work to turn it into a 3-dimensional kind of design. And I don't know if you can see the embossing on here. This was a new one on me. There's like a multi-layered embossing on these things. So there's like actually ribs that go around like a maple sugar tin. Anyway, but I find if you can get clients to trust you, then you can actually do your work. But the key is finding those clients that will trust you. And this project that I'm talking about with this Honeycomb Cream here is one that he came to me, and he's a distiller. He's not a designer or anything. So he's like, well, just do what you do. So part of it is that thing of, do the work that you want. So, I don't know how it is for you, Bobby, in your work. I imagine you get a lot of leeway to do what you want, which is awesome. And the results are incredible, like always astonishing what you come up with. So I would hope that you don't have to do much more than that, but I think the poster world is outside the, sometimes you don't often need Pantone color matching and things like that. You can be more intuitive about it.
Yeah, it's definitely similar. That's one of the trickiest parts of the process, though, and you need to find the right clients that will trust you and understand how the process works.
Yeah, and this tin client, I've designed probably 20 tins for them now, so they become a real regular client. And I actually made a misstep a year and a half or so ago when I was trying to integrate new technology into my workflow. I bought an iPad Pro with the stylus, and I just use it as a pencil sketch basically, but I started adding color to my prototypes because I thought it'd be easier for him to imagine, and it actually threw us way off our process. And we had to get back to pencil sketches. So I actually find that if you can iterate well with a pencil and clearly, that's often the most direct path for a client to see what it is that they're going to get. And extra details are actually really confusing to clients often, because like I said, you're the one that is the experience imagining what it's going to look like. They don't have that experience. Their job is not to picture something flat on a paper and imagine what it's going to look like in full color on a tin. That's my job. So, but that's not always so often they want to have that kind of control, but it actually ends up not always being the best result, right? And sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. And sometimes there are cases where it ends up being a better project for their involvement, I think. But often, you know, as an experienced artist, your intuition is probably the best voice in that. So if you can find clients that will trust you to lead you through that project, then that'll be the best result. Anyway, maybe I should move on to this project, or we're going to run out of time for it. But maybe we can talk about that more later. I'm always fascinated by that. Okay, so this local distillery for this product here. Now, as you can see, this is a handset type 2-color label. Again, this fellow came to me basically looking for branding and for product labels. Now, I took it on because I've always wanted to, like, I'm a fan of whiskey in general and distilled spirits. So I wanted, but I also wanted to be part of a process because I love the idea of hand printing a label. But it turns out to be a really complicated thing to do. And so I thought, as a bunch of printers, we could geek out on this a little bit, because I've had to sort of solve this. Now, it seems like there's a couple of major logistical challenges when you're printing a label. One is, what kind of paper do you use? You know, so your options are to have a big machine that applies adhesive and then applies the paper. But for that, you need enough volume of product and enough volume of labels to make this label adhering machine a viable alternative. And the other end of the spectrum is really small batch, where you are hand applying labels, and that gives you more versatility about size and what you put on it and stuff like that. But it's only really viable if you're doing like a few hundred bottles at a time. So there's this really funny window where a project like this works. And again, you have to have a client who's willing to trust you to do this. And so I've sort of been waiting for years and years for this client to come along, and finally this guy asked me to do it. So in this project, I did a whole bunch of research and figured out that there, you know, if you don't use actual bottle label paper, then the humidity of the conditions of these things, it can just peel off or wrinkle, or there's all kinds of things that can happen to the label themselves. And if you want to hand apply them, then you kind of need a sticker back label paper. Now, when you're looking for a sticker back label paper, there really is only one option, and it's not even advertised. It's a Nina paper option, and they advertise it as a digital sticker label. It's called a state label, and there's 2 colors, white and cream. And it doesn't even say that it's sticker back on their website. But after calling Nina a whole bunch of times, I found out that the digital version of their estate label paper comes with this split back sticker, peel away sticker label. And it's a nice laid finish. I don't know if you can, I'll try and hold this. Anyway, you all know what that is. So, okay, we found a paper we can use. So then we move on to the next step of how do we fit it on. And in British Columbia, we have a bunch of laws guiding, you know, what needs to be on the front and what needs to be on the back, and do you have a barcode, and like there's all these interesting kind of things. And to add another layer to all this, we're branding the product at the same time. So I'm starting to think about these things. We come up with a bottle shape, size, we come up with a label size, and then the goal is to brand this product with type I have in my collection, and hand print the label. So this is the concept we come up with. I'll do this. So I ended up printing them 2 up. But I'll sort of, this is sort of an earlier rendition here. You can sort of see me thinking through, now to go back to Bobby's question, I did start with pencil sketches, but when you have a really defined space, it still has to kind of evolve. And that's the great thing about metal type is you can sort of start and build and then, you know, go backwards and build a little bit more, and then keep changing and adapting, and all the while you have to kind of picture the 2 colors and the space and everything and how it's going to fit, and so I'd sort of be playing with these kinds of things. Is there a question there? Sorry, I can only see part of the little chat at the top there, so it's important.
Yes.
Maybe stuff.
Yeah, I'll definitely interrupt. You can keep going with you can finish your thought though there.
Okay. So yeah, it's a really great way, and I'll just flip the camera around here to show you the forms that I came up with, because I have them set out here. So again, this is on sort of mod borders and some great fonts. And I happen to have these cool little honeycomb things which suited the product. So I set the one together and then separated the 2 forms and set a second one so I could 2 up. I hope that was clear enough. It's hard to know what you guys are seeing at the other end with the jiggles and stuff, but so we printed that, and I printed 1,000 of the labels. Now the challenge is that to sort of meet government regulations, we also had to have information on the back as well. So in order to sort of preserve the hand set feel of it, I scanned these in, I vectorized them, I had a plate created, and then we printed, and then I redesigned the back with a barcode. Let me just grab one here. No, this is a second product I'll show you in a minute, but it's not going to focus on it, is it? Anyways, that's okay. So we sort of redesigned it, the barcode, so that we could scan it, and there's a place for them to stamp the date of the bottling as well. So, and then we hand printed those as well with matching colors, so you have a front label, back label. And then I used the vector of that to create digital files for them to put on their website for branding. Now this has created all kinds of interesting things, because then they decided to bottle it in a really small, like a 250 milliliter bottle. So we also combined these 2 things into one label and had them printed digitally. And the advantage of printing letterpress on a digital sheet is that now I can take this paper, which I've ordered in a case quantity for these guys, up to my local digital press and get them to print smaller things. Now these are too small and not cost effective enough to print, because the price point of this bottle is not going to be enough to absorb the cost of letterpress label, and this type is really tiny. So printing this even with a plate wasn't really a viable option. So now we have handset metal, we've got polymer plate, and we've got digital printing all on the same project and all on the same paper, which is kind of a fascinating thing to do, and because it's all this branding product. So the thing that I'm working on, or just finished doing this week, actually was a second product. Now he's taking the same, it's like a creamer. What I had to sort of think about this. We think of like Bailey's, but homemade and better and organic. That's this product is this Honeycomb Cream. It's delicious. I don't really like Bailey's, but this is amazing stuff. Anyways, he's making an oat version, and so this is the second batch. It's a dairy-free version of the same thing, oat and honey, and we decided to brand it differently. originally what I was planning on doing was just substituting the Honeycomb Cream for, just some different type in that space. But what we ended up doing in the end was redesigning the whole label. So yeah, here's a one color proof. And so what I ended up doing was scanning this. And because there was a couple of sorts on here that I only had one of, I actually had to get a polymer plate made of this one. So it's sort of one of those things where you're designing and you're like, well, I only have one of those. How we're going to make that work? In the end, we decided that the design was what we wanted, and not necessarily that we wanted the handset character, but not necessarily to print them all on metal type. So we printed one, and again, I'll show you the form for that. So we printed one, and then I had a plate made, and printed the second one. Literally just trimmed them and sent them to the client yesterday. So anyways, that's sort of been my ongoing project. And again, because it's a small client and they're bottling in sort of 150 at a time, hand applying labels, and they made a little jig to put them on. And I see a lot of these questions about color matching and stuff. Is a challenge for sure. Is there specific things about color matching, or?
There's a couple questions about, well, there was one about impression, but I think you helped answer that because they were asking if you did kiss impression on the label for preservation of your metal, but it sounds like you went from handset to polymer plate for the actual run. Is that correct?
On the oat and honey one I did, but on the Honeycomb Cream, I actually printed it on the metal type, and I made sure to not over pressure the paper for sure. It's I mean, it's a really stiff paper. One of the things about label paper is that it's really dense because you don't want it absorbing moisture because it will wrinkle. And the other thing we're discovering is that if you don't moisturize it before applying it, then it will wrinkle as well, because this stuff has to be stored in a cooler, which is quite a humid environment. So what they're doing is storing the labels in the cooler before applying them. And then when they apply them, they'll if it dries out a bit, it'll shrink, but at least it won't expand and wrinkle. So anyway, these are all the things we're learning about these, preconditioning. Exactly, right? I mean, this is one of the great things about being a letterpress printer, is that you figure this stuff out. I mean, it's there's no one to say, here's what you should do, it seems like, but it's really interesting because, the cost that I can get them on these labels is not that different than, like a bigger distiller will get they may be letterpress printed, but on the big roll or whatever. I think they end up being about $1 a piece. And I can sort of compete with that, especially once all the design and the typesetting is done. Like if we're reprinting these, then we're definitely hitting those same sort of price ranges, which makes it feasible for a small company selling a bottle of sort of artisan spirits for, I don't know what, $40 or whatever that would be. There's enough headroom in there to actually do something interesting with the label. So the color matching has been interesting with the digital press, the polymer, and the other. But again, when it comes down to sort of what kind of client you want, now this guy is kind of all about the texture and the handmade thing, and so he's quite okay with the color wandering a little bit. He doesn't care about Pantone colors. He just says, well, if it looks good to you, then it looks good. And of course, I want it to be as good as possible and as close as possible. But it's not like, it needs to be branded exactly the same from now until the end of time. And so, because it's a small company who, he just is like, I want you to do your thing and I'll do my thing. And where that overlap is our happy place. So yeah, it's kind of a dream client in a way. where you just kind of get that trust. The challenge about getting that trust is then you actually have to follow through. Like you can't slack. When someone trusts you, you have to meet their expectations. So
that's true. Well, and so it does sound like you're mixing your ink, not buying Pantone.
No, I hand mix. I mix by eye, actually, exclusively. I have a Pantone color swatch book, but I have never done it by weight or anything like that, which is a skill to develop for sure. But I've also never guaranteed a Pantone match. Like, I will tell people I will match your color, but I'm not going to guarantee it. So that's again where you're setting expectations, that because it's an older process, we have to teach people that they can't necessarily expect the same thing they would off of a 5-color Heidelberg offset press. It's a different kind of expectation,
Yeah.
So
there's a nice nitty-gritty question here. I like that Richard's asking, do you have a setup charge for the original setup, or are you including this in the cost of the labels and spreading it out, if you feel like answering kind of a specific?
Yeah, that depends a little bit. I do bill sort of based on time for setup. So I will try and estimate how much time it's going to be, and give them an idea of how much setting up like a handset form will be. And I'll try and explain to them how many they need to print to make it worthwhile to get it into their price point. And then sometimes I'll do extra work because I think it's important to do. So I don't have like a setup fee. I just sort of bill on an hourly rate based on the amount of time it'll take to set up and the amount of time it'll take to print. So I'll sometimes say, well, this first batch of 1,000 will be this, but the second batch will be different because you won't have necessarily the design and setup fee. And the interesting thing is, because when you're setting with type, you're doing production and design all at the same time. And so it's hard to separate those things. And there's also printing involved. So it's like design and setup and production all together. And I've always sort of tried to sell it to clients as a package. Be like, well, this is just part of it. So it's not a setup fee, because we can't actually go to the other part without that part. It's just part of it.
Yes. Yeah. It is all part of it. Right. Kelly, and her class, and I like this question. She wants to know, what is your most challenging project and what are you most proud of? We can tell you're definitely, like, all printmakers are problem solvers. And I think the great thing about this today is you're really kind of sharing that, which is wonderful. But her question was, was there one that was the most challenging and maybe you were the most proud of?
I think the most challenging project is one that I'm 2/3 of the way through now, but I can show the results of 2/3 of it because it's a large scale print product. So a local hotel has asked me to design artwork for their hotel walls, and they have 65 rooms, and they want different prints, not in all of them, but they want a variety. So in the end, we decided to do 3 large scale prints, and they wanted them to have some local theme and some sense of history, but also bright color, because the tendency for hotels is to find historic photos and blow them up and put them on walls. But when you go historic photos, they end up being they're pretty dismal, actually. Like, they're very stern looking people in black and white standing around looking very stern with their stern children, and some apocalypse kind of fire going on in the background. Like, that's a kind of historic photo that this was a significant event in the town's history, so we've taken a picture of it. And they really wanted to avoid that sort of negative darkness, but still bring in some history. Yeah, I mean, exactly. I see that in California today. I mean, Fernie burned down twice, actually, once in 1904 and once in 1908. So if you go into the historic archives of Fernie, what you find out is is that there's all these photos of when the town burned down twice. So, and actually there's this really funny photo, our local newspaper, which actually is still operating. They still have a gigantic paper cutter in the basement. They've been in the same building since 1908, since the second fire. But after that fire, they operated out of a tent. And so there's this photo of the Fernie Free Press, and in like a canvas tent. So they operated like that for a winter, which you can imagine in a place that snows as much as Fernie does would be a challenge. And there's this sort of story of their new press arriving after the fire and them not being able to get it off the train because of the amount of snow. So they had literally just pushed it off into the snow and dragged it from there. So I don't know how much of that is true, but that's the story I've heard. Anyway, so this project for the hotel, we kind of had to, it was a real challenge because the client is very particular, but very trusting. Like they're very, they're art lovers. And so I know they're expecting a high level of quality, but they're also giving me a lot of leeway saying, what would you like to do? What kind of imagery could you see? But here's our parameters, And so it was a real challenge to, again, meet their expectations as far as quality, and then to find things that were interesting to me and do it in a style that's relevant. And so anyways, we've been working on this project. The third one's been on hold because of the COVID-19 and the travel restrictions, and the hotel business is kind of all in stasis right now. But the first two we finished in March. And so I can show those to you. So this is the first one, or this is the second one here. I'm gonna get a glare on there, try and get it. So one of the interesting things about Fernie is that we have the ski hill. It's a ski town, and in 1964, a group of people started working on an Olympic bid. So this is actual real history. This is back in the day when like a luge run was a fenced off banked snow ski hill. So it was a lot simpler to apply for Olympics. This is let me see, a 7-color reduction print with 2 colors of handset type over top. So one of the challenges of this was trying to use the Olympic bid, because the Olympic Committee can get very particular about the use of the logo and Olympics in any work. But anyway, so that was one where we were trying to do a positive reinforcement of Fernie's history. So there's one. And this is the other one here. I'll try and hold that up here too. And so this is a local falls. This is called Fairy Creek Falls. It's just out of town. You can literally walk to it from my house. And this is an 11-color reduction print. And there's no type involved, obviously, but a significant amount of work to carve and print an edition of, I think this was an edition of 60, but I actually lost almost half of them because of, well, it's a long story. Anyways, there ended up being more texture in the middle here than I wanted, and some of them I couldn't live with, so we went from 60 to 40. So I think that's probably the most challenging project I've done, partly because of the expectations of the clients, but partly because of the size. They're 20 by 24 prints. And so just printing a lino block that is 20 by 24 is a challenge, especially when you're using textured paper. This is one of the lessons that I learned. I'm using canal paper from Saint Armand in Montreal for this project. It's a lot more textured than like Letra. Letra would be great, but Letra in Canada right now I think is about $8 to $10 a sheet. So this canal paper is about $4. It's handmade, but that as a result it has a lot of variety. And it's also, you know, as local as we can get for a Canadian paper, and this client was interested in it being from, like, if we could find paper made in Canada, then that was an important thing for them. So lots of parameters and lots of expectations, but lots of creative leeway. So anyways, that was it continues to be a challenging project. So.
Well, Meredith had a good question about that. Do your clients normally select your paper, or do you, or how does that come out of your process?
Sorry, can you say that again? I missed part of it.
Do you or your clients tend to select your paper for jobs?
Generally, it's me. Again, it has to do with the supply. Like, one of the interesting things about operating out of Canada and also out of a smaller town, Canada, is getting things here is really difficult. You know, in Canada, we have one paper distributor with spicers, and they tend to price based on volume. So if I buy, like, you know, $1,200 of paper 4 times a year, I'm not getting a great price. If you're a 24/7, 3 shift, 7 days a week operator like that of Print Solutions out of Calgary, then you get a much better price on paper. And they do have some of the fancier papers, and they can get things like Letra, but often it's by the case or by the carton or by the like larger volumes than I actually need. So I'm buying more paper than a client would ever be able to use. So it's very rare that I can find through our local distributor paper that is reasonably priced and suits. So I tend to bring in a selection and have on hand certain things that I think will work for the kind of work I do. But mostly it's me saying, well, here's a couple of options, and, you know, this one is more budget and this one is more expensive. Yes. and let them choose. So I'm really guiding them carefully.
Yeah. I think there's one last question because we're coming up to our hour. I could easily see me wanting to talk to you all day. And let's see, we have a question. Do you print all of your Lino prints at Taipai on the Vandercook?
I do. That's a very good question. Let me just show you one more thing here.
Yeah.
So I created for myself this base. So you can actually see, this is the last thing I printed was the skier from that on this base. And it's a 3/4 inch plywood, like a high grade birch ply. And it's a really consistent width. And I find that with 2 pieces of chipboard and the double-sided adhesive tape and the lino, it's exactly Taipai. So sometimes if I need a little bit more pressure for surface area, I'll shim it up a little bit more with like 3/1000ths or 5/1000ths of an inch bond paper or something underneath. Excuse me. But this is what I use, and you can see I've gridded it off in inch grids, and I adhere the lino, so I treat it like a boxcar base in a way. So,
are you just doing the boxcar base backing?
No, again, buying the double-sided adhesive tape was a challenge I had to solve, and eventually I found through Anderson Vreeland, I think, in Canada, which maybe they changed their name to something else. It was someone's name was like someone will know that. Anyways, they I contacted them, the printer supply place, and I got some inks from them at some point. They used to carry Van Son inks in Canada, and they dug around and found a roll of 5/1000ths thick double-sided tape. It was really expensive. I think it was almost $200, but it's lasted me years. So it looks like I'm getting down to it now, and so I'm a little worried. But it was like this, and it's 12 inches, 12-inch roll. So when I'm using a piece of lino that's 12 inches, then it sort of covers it.
That's great.
So I just had to make sure that it was the same thickness as the boxcar stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so they dug around, and I guess they still, print, the offset printing industry still uses this for some things. So yeah. Is there any other questions? Like, I don't have to run off, so if people want to stay and ask questions, I'm happy to do that.
That sounds good. I might do a quick finish up for anybody who has to run, because, and I don't either, so we can stick around for a bit. I do want to say, stick around. We'll ask another question or two if you've got them, because I think you're answering really great, like in-depth questions, and sometimes we don't get to get that far in, which is really nice. What I will say is thank you all for joining us. I'm gonna just do a quick copy and paste to give you guys a link to our Hamilton Ways Goose, because we do have our online conference coming up. And in fact, if we have students on the call, this is really good to know. We have 3 different kinds of scholarships this year. So September 15th is the deadline for students who are still in college. So in fact, I'm gonna go put that over in the link right now, because we would love for you guys to apply for that. We also have, let's see if I get the name right, financial assistance scholarship. So if anybody's having, if it's a hardship for you to apply to come to Ways Goose right now with the cost, on the scholarship page, you can see the financial scholarships link. And then also we have, if there's anybody here who live in Manitowoc, we're doing community scholarships, which is really a new thing for us. And we're really excited that we can do that this year. So if anybody here is in Manitowoc, in the whole county, you can apply there. So let's see. Also, I think my other big thing is we do have lots more people coming up for the next ham hangs. Like, we've got a really nice full calendar, which is good. So I've put the link over there. You can see who's coming up next. Let's see, we've got next Friday. Ooh, we're doing Paul Shaw is going to be our co-host for next Friday at noon. So it's great. We've been having more that we talk about type and lettering and calligraphy. So he'll take us on a different journey next week. And let's see, the final thing is, oh yeah, if you want to see more programming like this, please become a member. It's a really great way to support Hamilton. So I want to say thank you everybody on the call who are members, because we really appreciate it, and we can do it because of you. And if you haven't become a member, we ask that you consider supporting us in that way. So we can keep chatting. I just wanted to make sure I get my little Hamilton ad in for anybody who had to leave at the hour. So thank you guys for joining us, but we'll stick around for a bit.
Yeah, thanks everybody that has to go. Like, again, don't rush off, but if you have to go, thanks for joining, and really appreciate you guys coming and asking questions and whatnot.
Yeah, Michael, this has been great. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've seen lots of nodding heads and note taking. So
I'm got the gallery view going now, so I can see more people now.
Yes, I think I finally canceled the spotlight. Yeah, now we can see faces.
Yeah, lots of great faces.
Michael, I have another question for you. I think it's really cool. Like, being, I feel like I relate to you in many ways, but the small town thing is, I really think is cool how you seem to have like kind of found your place in your town, and like working with all these other small businesses and like these relationships you've built with your town. I don't know how big Fernie is, but I'd be curious to hear you just talking about that. I think letterpress printing in general, there's this cool element of the relationship to your community in your town, or your neighborhood if you're in a big city. But it seems like you've kind of found that, and I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. Well, Fernie is about 5,000 people, so it's not a big place. Although we're a tourism center, so one of the reasons we moved here, I moved here from a town about an hour away that has 20,000 people, but was not nearly as open to the creative industry, if you catch my meaning. So Fernie draws from Calgary, lot, and the international as well, typically for tourism. So in order to do this in a small town, and initially our setup was a gallery space, a lot like what you're doing there, where I would make prints and sell prints and make my own work, as well as, we sold some other local artisans work. To do that, we needed more people traveling through than just 5,000. But I've always been a person who wants to be involved in a community, and I've always really enjoyed being part of a growing arts community, as well as like just a community as a whole. And so I really wanted that to be one of the values of my press and print shop, because that's a value that I carry with me. I always, I might come to a place because I like the place, but I stay because of the people that are here and, that surrounded me. And Fernie's been a place that has embraced the weird thing that I do, and I realized early on that education was a big part of it, where people would come in and, it was funny watching them, because they would walk in and be like, well, these are nice. Hey, what is that? Is that a printing press? You're not, oh, this is really cool. Hey, come on in. Like, hey, honey, check this out. Like having the presses answered all the questions, but that was kind of a regular dialogue I got, was people kind of not ever having understood what letterpress printing is, and then saying like, hey, this is really awesome that this is here, and so Western Canada is a really young place. Like, I think about some of the Eastern Canada, as well as Southern states, and there's 300 or 400 years of printing history there. We have like 100 maybe. 100 years ago, Fernie was the Wild West. It was crazy. So we don't have this sort of cultural latent knowledge about printing. People will go to these historic things and they're like, do newspapers on that? And that's about all we have here, right? So to do something graphic or show printy, or other kind of more creative things with the printing press is kind of outside of our cultural thinking here, which is a very interesting thing to have to address. And so it's been being part of a small community where the people in it are your advocates has been a benefit. So it's been great. But certainly I would have probably had more financial success setting up somewhere in a bigger center, just more people to draw from and more traffic through. So, but that's not me. I'm not interested in living in a big city. So
we find it's part of the interesting thing here in Two Rivers as well, that when people come, they're kind of like turning off from whatever they're doing in their normal city and their normal lives. So that's been an interesting thing as well. There's a lot of artists between Manitowoc, Two Rivers, because we're only about 5 minutes away from Manitowoc, that you tend to find your people, right? Because then you can work together to kind of build that community.
Yeah, and if you can find a place that's supportive, I think that's really important. And then what I found is that, like you said, people would come and visit, and they might come to ski, or they might come to bike or do other things, but they would always stop in. Mm-hmm. So I found that I got a really loyal group of people that coming by. I didn't need as many because the people that were there were really loyal and supportive. So it's just a different way, and who knows if it would work. And obviously we don't have a retail gallery. Most of my work is these sort of custom commissions now, but I still do like doing my own prints and selling them, and that's the current challenge, is that I don't have a gallery space right now. So
yeah.
Any other questions on there?
I was just going to brag that I have my Clawhammer mints keeping my breath fresh today.
Right on. Have you tried the new citrus?
I haven't had a special delivery in a while.
Oh, well, I don't know if I can deliver these through the Aways Goose.
Yeah, there you go. Mike, I thought it was when you were talking about the small town. One of our vendors, who's like this large packaging, he's one of the largest packaging printers in Denver. he showed up. Remember that guy walked into your shop and like, do you remember
Oh,
that?
yeah.
And like, so this
Yeah.
guy shows up with a bunch of Mike stuff and hands it to me. And I'm like, what? How did this happen? He was in Fernie.
You know, small world.
It is a very small world. It puts us all together.